Fairies are real. I know this because I live with one. Her name is Aria. That is not the name she was given, but it's the one that she prefers to use. Aria is turning 8 years old next week, and in honor of that, she has decided that she is going to host a fairy school for her birthday. She's inviting her friends from the human world to come and learn how to cast spells, make magic potions, and magic jewelry. I get to play the role of Fairy Queen Mother, otherwise known as the videographer, because, well, as everything Aria does has to be made into her next iMovie. She's made about a dozen of these of her fairy life, and our home is papered with her drawings of changelings, princesses, unicorns, and castles. As you might imagine, Aria is a pretty unusual little girl. At the age of 3.5, she was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, otherwise known as ASD. And the type she has is called Asperger's. It used to be anyway, after Hans Asperger, the Austrian pediatrician, who first observed children who, while above average intelligence or average intelligence and maybe with great gifts, had difficulty with social interaction, wouldn't look you in the eye, had a lot of preference for routines and really intense special interests. Well, today, Aria considers herself a proud Aspie. She is extremely smart. She does very well in school. She reads at a grade 6 level, and she spoke her first word at the age of 8 months. It was not mom or dad. It was car, but okay. She knows what she likes. She also grasps concepts far beyond her years. When she was 4 years old, she looked at me and she said, "You know, I'm tired of talking about your reality. Let's talk about my reality for a while." She also has a great memory for details, which is really useful because I can never remember anybody's name. But Aria also has her challenges, and she can have some pretty titanic meltdowns when things don't go her way or as planned. She gets anxious when she's in big crowds sometimes, or new experiences, even birthday parties, and she's very sensitive to loud sounds. She also has difficulty reading other people's emotions, and she can often hurt them with a cutting word. But most of all, she has the amazing ability to create her own world in which she loves to live and where she spends a lot of her time. Aria considers herself a changeling, and curiously, she might be right. There's evidence now that the Irish Changeling Myth, which spoke of human infants being switched in the dead of night for fairy children, might have actually been an early way of explaining autism. Parents would find their children suddenly changed, looking away, not speaking, in their own world. This closely mirrors the experience today of children who will stop developing neurotypically or sometimes even regress close to the age of 2. Now, you can only imagine how difficult it must have been for parents to deal with these issues in the days before neuroscience. But even today, when a child is diagnosed with ASD, parents often feel very bereft and confused. They mourn the child they thought they had, they mourn the future that they envisaged for that child, and their first impulse is, "I want to change my changeling." Well, some changes can be very beneficial. Opening up communication for a child, anyone with ASD, is crucial to lessen frustration and allow them to use their gifts. Aria's had the gamut of interventions, intensive behavior intervention, therapy for occupational issues, physical issues, social issues, and it's helped her a lot. But along the way, what our family realized is that she had as much to teach us as we had to teach her. And rather than constantly adapting or allowing her to adapt to the neurotypical world, we had to adapt our world to her. And in doing so, we realized something amazing. A lot of the things we were doing and the changes we made weren't just benefiting her or benefiting us, but could benefit a whole host of people. People who had nothing to do with ASD. Parents who want a calmer home life. Children who are struggling in school. Employers who are looking for a more talented workforce. So I want to share 5 of those things today with you that could make our world a better place. 5 things I have learned from a fairy. The first is how we could make a better school system. The schools in my area near Toronto do not resemble this school. They are not, a lot of them, happy places. In fact, bullying is epidemic. Teachers have, in some cases, been issued Kevlar armor in elementary school to deal with children who act out, and burnout of teachers is a huge problem. The classes in these schools are generally 25 to 30 children. Now, if we applied some of the basic principles used to educate kids with ASD to all kids, we wouldn't have to have this situation. One of those is that children with ASD need a calm learning environment, they need a lot of attention, and they need a lot of movement through their day. How do we achieve this? Okay, think about it. In our public schools, if we cut those classes of 25 to 30 kids in half to 12 to 15 children, immediately you would double the amount of time and attention a teacher could give to each child. Immediately, today, you would cut the noise level in half, a distraction level in half. You would give more space and freedom for those kids to literally get up out of their desk. And you would have a school, and this is not a special needs school, but you would have a school that's a lot like the one I found for Aria, after considerable trial and effort, I will add, but one which caps enrollment at 100 students from grades 1 to 8. Now, this isn't just my opinion. I spoke to an educational researcher, Jennifer Donnelly, at the George Brown College, who studies autism but education in general, and I asked her, if you could change one thing in education, what would it be? And she said, class size, right away, because all the things I mentioned would follow. So yes, it would be expensive, but it would be worth it to create schools where our kids would want to be, rather than where they have to be, where they're not bullied. Schools like you would find the one I found for my ferry. Then there's the health system. When your child is diagnosed with ASD, I'll tell you, you want a fairy godmother. You want one so bad. You're looking around, you're saying, please someone just wave a magic wand and show me the way and what we can do to help our daughter. Unfortunately, it's more like your Cinderella in the attic with a bunch of phone numbers that are handed to you and a few names, and you're on your own. But this doesn't just happen to people who are dealing with autism spectrum disorder. Anyone who is in an accident, anyone who is dealing with a serious or chronic illness, anyone who's got a loved one with dementia knows that your primary job suddenly becomes finding help and treatment for that condition. In our public system, well, if you know someone, you can get service faster than people who don't. Alternatively, you can pay $100 an hour because there are now actual businesses that will be health counselors or advisors, and they will work with you to find and navigate your way through the system. Again, it shouldn't be this way. Our family was lucky enough to connect with an organization called Resources for Exceptional Children and Youth. The waitlist was 2 years, but it was worth it. I served on the board of this organization as well, and it existed as a nonprofit simply to show families the way, not to provide services or treatment, but simply point them to what was available and would be appropriate for them in their area. And I saw firsthand the difference this made in families' lives, not simply because it created a roadmap, but because they felt someone actually cared and someone had their back. So I say, why shouldn't this patient advocacy be available to all patients who are dealing with a serious medical issue? This would also be expensive, but patient advocates, not doctors or insurance companies, would also be a means of helping people find treatment faster so things don't get worse, and alleviating that terrible stress that comes with serious illness. Then there's the workplace. My daughter Aria would bring an amazing set of creativity and ideas to any workplace, including a sculpture workshop, which is what she drew when I asked her what would be a workplace, and that's what she thought she'd like to work in. Other children with ASD, or when they are adults, would bring other things. One of her friends is amazingly gifted in math. Sometimes people who are on the spectrum would find routine tasks soothing rather than boring. You know, not everyone with ASD is a savant. Rain Man? No, that is really a myth. But everyone brings something to the table. Unfortunately, most employers don't realize that, and it is estimated that 80 to 90% of adults with ASD are unemployed. With 1% of the world's population considered to be on the spectrum, and 1 in 68 children now considered to be there as well, this is a staggering and inexcusable waste of potential. There are companies that are now incorporating neurodiversity into their workplaces, including Airbnb, Hewlett-Packard, and Facebook. But my message to all employers is, don't shut out the unusual, because you'll be missing out on an opportunity. You know, not everyone on your team has to have amazing executive function or superior social skills. That systems designer who looks at the floor when they talk to you might be a fabulous complement to the very engaging salesperson. Now, they say there's no I in team, and they're right. But there is an E for exceptionalities, and there is an A for ASD, or atypical, or amazing. The fourth thing I've learned from my fairy is how to be a better parent. Fairies need very intense parenting, I will tell you, because literally they're always trying to fly away. You take Aria to the zoo, and she will want to climb into the polar bear exhibit as opposed to standing behind it. You take her to someone's house for the first time. She will run up the stairs to feel the limits of the space on her body so she doesn't feel like she's floating away. Try explaining that to people. But what I have learned from Aria in all my efforts to also teach her empathy, because this is the other big piece with kids on the spectrum, we're always telling them to put themselves in other people's shoes because they lack something called theory of mind, which is the ability to understand that other people think differently from you. I have learned that empathy is a two-way street. This book, I encourage every parent to read. It's called Connected Parenting by author Jennifer Kolari, and I happened upon it when I was at a therapy appointment, spending my time waiting for it to end. And basically the premise is this: if you empathize with your child in a moment of difficulty and you mirror that understanding back to them, they will connect with you in that moment. They will take the time to calm down and then solve the problem, whatever is going on. And I'll tell you, this actually really works. It works for any child, ASD or not. The trick is, though, doing it when you're frustrated, pressed for time, or working on your TED Talk. It can be hard. And this brings me to the last thing I have learned from a fairy about myself. I've learned that we're all on a spectrum of some kind. Now, I've done the online autism test. I'm as neurotypical as you can get. And yet there are times when mommy can have really big meltdowns, too. When I'm stuck in traffic or going crazy on the job, and I realize we all have limits and triggers that we have to manage, and if we stay calm as parents of any kind of child, they'll stay calmer too. I also realize that I shouldn't judge people. I shouldn't look at someone like they're a unicorn walking into the room. What is that guy doing? That's awkward. Because you never know what's happening in their head, and maybe they're not comfortable with the space they're in. Maybe they have a physical sensitivity or reaction to something going on around them. Don't judge and don't assume. I have my fairy to thank for that insight and for all the ones I've brought you. 5 things that could make our world a better place today. Smaller classes in our schools, a helping hand in healthcare, neurodiversity to strengthen the workplace, greater empathy as parents, and more self-awareness as people. These are the 5 things I have learned from a fairy. And they all boil down to one last thing. That is that we all have so much to learn from each other. We are all both students and teachers. And if we approach our life not as a series of obstacles to overcome, but as a journey of lessons to be learned, we can find wonder and joy and knowledge in even the most difficult moments. And if we're really lucky, we might even catch a glimpse of fairyland. Thank you.